Single dad came begging for milk for his child. She held the baby and filled the space called Mom. The wind howled like a wounded animal through the black Oregon night. Snow drove sideways in thick sheets, erasing the edges of the road of trees of certainty itself. Luke Henderson tightened his arms around the bundle of flannel and fleece clutched to his chest. His boots crunched over ice, slipping with every desperate step along the narrow country road. His breath came in ragged bursts, fogging the freezing air, but the sound that tore through him louder than the storm was the frail, cracking wail of his daughter. Gracie. She was 11 days old, and she hadn't eaten in 7 hours. Luke's truck had given out 5 miles back engine light, blinking battery dying, and heat gone completely. He had tried everything. He'd begged the night manager at the Ridge Hollow Motel to let them stay the night. The man had glanced at Luke's battered jacket the baby clutched against his chest and the cash only $27 and shook his head. No ID, no card. Sorry, man. Try the church. The church was dark. The clinic was closed. The convenience store clerk wouldn't even look at him when he asked about formula. So now he walked. Past midnight. Past exhaustion. Past the point of shame. The last house on Willow Creek Road still had its porch light on. The others had gone dark hours ago, swallowed by the storm or the holidays. This one stood at the edge of a hill cabin-style tall chimney smoking with warm light glowing from a single window. Luke's knees buckled as he reached the steps. He shifted Gracie, carefully pressing her to his chest as he raised his fist and knocked. No answer. He knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. He was about to turn away when the door creaked open 3 inches and stopped. A sliver of light spilled out onto the snow, and a woman's voice, low and cautious, cut through the cold. We don't open for strangers after midnight. Luke took half a step forward, just enough for her to see him, fully see the bundle in his arms. Please, he said, I don't need anything for me. My daughter, she's hungry. I just need milk, somewhere warm to feed her. That's all. The door opened wider, revealing a woman in her early 40s wrapped in a thick sweater over a worn plaid flannel. Her hair was tied back in a loose braid streaked with gray, her face pale and lined with the weariness of someone who hadn't spoken to another soul in days. She looked at him, then at the baby. Then she looked away. There's a clinic downtown. It's closed. Then call someone. I don't have anyone left to call. A beat of silence passed. A gust of wind slammed into them. Gracie whimpered. The woman took 1 step back. You can come in, but just for tonight, and only until the storm breaks. Luke didn't hesitate. He stepped inside, snow melting off his boots onto the hardwood floor. Warmth hit him like a wave, dry, wood-scented air that nearly made him dizzy. The woman closed the door, quickly locked it, and walked past him toward the kitchen. There's a fire going in the den. You can sit there. He moved toward the glow of the fireplace, settling onto the rug with Gracie still tucked close. She had stopped crying, but her breaths were shallow and uneven. Luke rocked her gently, whispering her name like a prayer. From the kitchen came the sound of cupboards opening. Then silence. Then, you didn't say she was a newborn. I didn't have time. I don't have formula. Luke closed his eyes. Then I'll try warm water. Or oats. I have to try something. She stepped into the doorway holding a ceramic mug. Her eyes fell to the child. She's freezing. I've been holding her the whole time. I didn't let go. She needs body heat. More than that. She walked slowly to him and knelt. Luke looked up startled as she reached out not for him, but for Gracie. May I? She asked. He hesitated. You're a stranger. So are you. But she won't last much longer like this. Their eyes locked for 1 long second. Then he nodded. She unbuttoned her sweater, revealing a worn thermal shirt beneath. She pressed Gracie gently to her chest and wrapped both of them in a thick blanket. The baby whimpered. Then quieted, the tiniest exhale against the woman's skin. Luke sat back against the couch, his hands trembling. I didn't know what else to do. She wouldn't eat the last bottle. I think the formula went bad. I couldn't even afford the powdered stuff. The woman didn't speak right away. Her eyes were on Gracie. Finally, she said, "She's not the first baby I've seen like this." He looked at her. "Are you a nurse?" A shadow passed over her face. "I used to be something like that." They sat in silence, the crackle of the fire the only sound between them. Then, softly, Luke said, "I'm Luke." The woman nodded. "Nora." "Nora," he repeated. "Thank you." "You saved her." She didn't answer. Instead, she looked down at the sleeping child against her chest, the first child she'd held in years, and whispered so quietly Luke almost missed it. "I wasn't fast enough the last time." And, for the first time since his wife died, Luke saw someone else break. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just quietly enough that he knew the pain had lived there a long time. And now, maybe it had found a place to begin healing. The fire burned low in the stone hearth as the storm raged outside, blanketing Ridge Hollow in silence and snow. Luke sat with his back against the couch, his head tilted, listening to the soft, steady breaths of his daughter. For the first time in hours, she was quiet, safe, warm, and she wasn't in his arms. Nora Winslow sat cross-legged on the floor near the hearth, wrapped in an old wool blanket with Gracie curled against her chest. Her posture was careful, almost rigid, like holding the baby wasn't natural to her, but something she had remembered how to do out of instinct. The soft lines on her face were drawn tight eyes cast downward, not in tenderness but concentration. Or restraint. She hadn't spoken since whispering that haunting confession, "I wasn't fast enough the last time." Luke hadn't dared ask what she meant. Not yet. His voice broke the stillness. "She hasn't slept that soundly since, well, ever." Nora didn't look at him. Babies know when someone is calm. She's not responding to you. She's responding to quiet. There was no malice in her tone, just fact. Still, it stung. "I used to be calmer," Luke murmured, rubbing his knuckles. "Before everything. Everything." He hesitated, but the storm outside had a way of stripping pretense. "Before I lost my wife. She bled out after delivery. Hospital said it was a rare complication. I think it was just delayed care, insurance paperwork." No one said it, but I saw the hesitation in their eyes. Nora's fingers flinched slightly against the baby's back. What was her name? Madeline. Another pause. She would have liked, Gracie Luke added, almost to himself. She was the one who picked the name. Nora finally looked up. Her eyes weren't soft, they were guarded. But there was something there. A crack, maybe. A shadow of something that used to be warmth. "She's not eating, you know," she said. "I know," Luke admitted. "I didn't have enough bottles left. The last one turned sour. I was going to try oats or something." "Oats," Nora repeated, the edge of disbelief in her voice. "She's 11 days old. Her digestive system isn't ready for that." Luke exhaled through his nose, trying not to bristle. "I know I'm screwing this up. Believe me, I'm the first one to say it. But I'm doing the best I can." Something about his voice, frustrated, raw pleading, made Nora blink like she'd come out of a trance. "She's not the first baby I've had to improvise with," she said after a moment. Luke leaned forward slightly. "Were you a doctor?" She didn't answer immediately. Her hands tensed around the baby's back, then relaxed. She adjusted Gracie's position gently, almost automatically. "I was. A pediatric trauma physician. Haiti, Sudan, Nepal. Places that don't show up on tourist maps." He whistled under his breath. "That's serious work." "I used to think it mattered," she said, "until it didn't." Luke tilted his head. "What happened?" Nora stood slowly still, cradling Gracie, and walked toward the hallway. "This room is warm. You can sleep here tonight. I'll bring you extra blankets. Don't touch the cabinets. Don't go upstairs. And don't ask about my past again." She disappeared down the hall without waiting for a reply. Luke stared at the fireplace, the orange light flickering across the wooden floor, wondering how someone who moved like a ghost could hold his daughter as if she'd never let go. 20 minutes later, Nora returned with a folded flannel quilt and a small heating pad. Gracie was still in her arms, sound asleep. She passed Luke the blanket without looking at him. "She can stay with me tonight," she said. "I'll monitor her breathing. If her fever spikes again, I'll know." Luke hesitated. "I should be the one she's not safe without constant attention right now," Nora said simply. "You need to sleep. If you crash, she loses everything." He couldn't argue with that. His legs ached, his back throbbed, and his eyes burned. He was running on fumes. Still, it took everything in him to nod and hand over full trust to a stranger with no nameplate, no badge, just a fireplace and a quiet kind of command. "Okay," he said, finally. "Okay." As Nora turned, Luke spoke again. "Thank you. I mean that." She didn't stop walking, but her voice reached him low and hoarse. "I'm not doing this for you." Luke lay awake for a long time, listening to the fire crackle and the wind screech against the old cabin walls. Somewhere down the hallway, a woman who had sworn to stay detached was holding his baby against her heart. And for the first time in days, he let the exhaustion drag him under. Nora didn't sleep. She stayed seated in the armchair beside her bedroom window, the storm glazing the glass with frost. Gracie's tiny form curled against her. She had monitored vitals in war zones under candlelight and gunfire. She had carried children out of collapsed buildings into makeshift tents, their bodies broken but still alive. And she had failed. Gracie. The name still pierced her like a blade. A little girl with malaria. 4 years old, same name, same eyes. Her mother had screamed for help, but the medicine was late. Customs had held it at the border. Nora had promised to return in 10 minutes. It took 12. She had never forgiven herself. Now, in a quiet Oregon cabin, a child with the same name lay breathing softly against her. Fragile. Alive. Nora brushed her fingers gently along the baby's cheek. "You're not her," she whispered, barely audible. "But I won't run this time." The wind groaned outside. Inside, something cracked quietly open in her chest. And stayed open. The morning crept in slowly through the frost-laced windows, casting long blue shadows across the cabin's wooden floor. Luke stirred awake, still curled under the flannel quilt on the living room rug. His back ached and his legs were stiff from sleeping on the floor, but it was the silence that startled him most. Silence meant Gracie wasn't crying. He bolted upright. Before panic could take over, he heard a faint hum from down the hallway, soft, tuneless, almost like a lullaby. He followed the sound to find Nora in the kitchen, one arm cradling Gracie, the other pouring hot water into a steel pot. The baby was nestled against her shoulder cheeks, pink with warmth, breath slow and even. She looked safe. Nora didn't glance up. She woke at 4. Took a while to calm her. No fever. Luke exhaled. "Thank God. I made oatmeal," she said. "For us, not her." He nodded, unsure if he should speak or stay quiet. He hovered near the doorway like a visitor in someone else's life. When she turned around and handed him a steaming bowl, their eyes finally met. "I owe you," he said. "More than I can ever." "You owe me nothing," she cut in. "But you'll follow my rules if you're staying through the storm." Luke blinked. "Rules?" She placed her bowl on the table with quiet finality. "This isn't a shelter. You're a guest in my home." He nodded, straightening slightly. "Understood." She ticked them off on her fingers. "No entering my office. No going upstairs. No touching the books in the hallway. You handle all your daughter's diapers and feeding if you're lucky enough to get her to eat. And you leave the moment the road's clear. No extensions, no discussions." Luke studied her. Her tone was calm, even clinical. But her eyes betrayed her just for a second. Behind the cool precision was something else. Fear, no. Grief, controlled but still breathing. "I get it," he said. "You're not looking to play house." Nora didn't respond. Instead, she settled into a chair at the corner of the kitchen table and reached for a spoon. Gracie let out a small sigh in her arms and drifted back to sleep. Luke took a bite of the oatmeal. It was bland, thick, but warm. Comforting. He hadn't tasted anything that felt like home in days. They ate in silence for a few minutes until Luke set his spoon down gently. "You didn't have to let us in last night. Most people wouldn't have." "I'm not most people," she said plainly. "I know." She looked up. "I mean that, in a good way," Luke added. He saw something flicker in her expression, a pull between wanting to stay walled in and wanting to believe someone could mean that. She leaned back slightly, her eyes on the sleeping infant. "She looks like her mother Luke's throat tightened." "Yeah. Same mouth, same little wrinkle between the brows when she's fussy." "Your wife?" Nora hesitated. "She didn't survive childbirth." "No." He drew a shaky breath. "Hemorrhaged. We were at a county hospital, short-staffed. Paperwork delays because our insurance hadn't transferred from my last job. By the time someone finally got to her..." He didn't finish. Nora's voice was a whisper. "I'm sorry." He looked at her, surprised. "You don't strike me as someone who says that lightly." "I don't." Another silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy. The kind of silence born between people who had both watched someone they loved slip away, helpless to stop it. Eventually, Nora stood and gently handed Gracie back to Luke. "She needs to eat again soon. If you have what's left of the formula, I can help you check it." Luke nodded. "It's in the truck. I'll go get it." She paused at the door. "There's a snow shovel by the porch. Use it. You'll need it to clear a path back up the road anyway." Luke stepped outside into the crisp, stinging air. The snow had piled high along the edges of the driveway, drifted up against the truck's sides like a white cocoon. He brushed it off with numb fingers, fished the small insulated lunch bag from the passenger seat, and trudged back inside, stomping snow off his boots. Nora examined the formula packet carefully. Expired. No good. It might have made her sicker. Luke clenched his jaw. "I thought maybe I could stretch it. Just a day or two." She said nothing, but the look she gave him was not judgment, it was weary understanding. "I have oats," he offered. "Rice, a can of condensed milk." "She's 11 days old," Nora said gently. "Not 11 months. She needs proper nutrition. And sterilized water. Nothing you have will work. So, what do I do?" Nora looked toward the pantry, hesitating. "I could try donor milk," she said slowly. "I know someone in town, a retired midwife. But roads are shut. No telling how long. Then, what a long pause. Then, quietly, she'll need to latch. If I stimulate enough response, I might be able to produce colostrum. It's rare this late in life, but I've done harder things in worse places." Luke's breath caught. "You'd do that for her. I'd do it because I don't want to fail again." It wasn't pity or charity. It was redemption. Luke saw it in the way her eyes never left Gracie's face. "You're not failing," he said. "Not yet." Later that day, Luke chopped firewood outside while Nora cleaned the bottles he'd brought in from the truck. She moved through her space like someone who used to care about every small detail and was only just remembering why she should care again. Inside that small cabin on Willow Creek, the storm still held the world hostage. But between the smell of fresh wood smoke and the steady rise and fall of a newborn's breath, something thawed. Not the snow, not even the grief, but something older. Hope. The wind had died by evening, but the silence it left behind was heavier than the storm. Luke sat at the edge of the hearth watching Gracie sleep in the small bassinet Nora had pulled from a storage closet. The thing was old, its paint chipped, but it was clean and cushioned and clearly cared for. Luke hadn't asked where it came from. He wasn't sure he wanted to know. Nora sat across from him in the armchair, a book open in her lap but untouched for over an hour. Her fingers rested lightly on the pages, but her eyes hadn't moved. The firelight flickered across her cheekbones, softening the otherwise austere lines of her face. Luke cleared his throat. "You said earlier that she's not the first baby you've had to improvise with." Nora didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, she turned the page without reading it. "I did. I don't mean to pry. I just—" He hesitated, weighing the moment. "I think you've been saving her, not just helping her. I don't know what happened before, but I've seen how you look at her." Nora's voice was quiet. "You should be careful making assumptions about people you barely know." Luke nodded. "Fair, but I don't think I'm wrong." She looked at him for a long moment and for once didn't deflect. "She was 4, she said softly. Her name was also Gracie." Luke's breath caught. "Haiti," she continued. "A village clinic we set up during a dengue outbreak. Her mother carried her in barely conscious. I had adrenaline, IV fluids, a plan, but I didn't have time. Customs had held up our shipment of epinephrine. The courier arrived 13 minutes after she died." Luke didn't speak. He couldn't. "I held her while her mother screamed in Creole and cursed me," Nora whispered, her voice cracking. "And she was right. I told her I'd fix it. I told her to wait 10 minutes. It took 12. She stood abruptly and walked to the window, arms folded tight across her chest. The trees beyond the glass were rimmed in ice branches heavy with snow. The whole world looked frozen. I came home and couldn't step inside a hospital again. Not after that. Not after the silence in that woman's eyes. I shut everything down. My license, my practice, my life." Luke rose, slowly approaching her with care. "That's not failure. That's the weight of caring too much." Nora shook her head. "That's the kind of mistake you don't get to outrun." "No," Luke said gently, "but maybe you don't have to outrun it. Maybe you just have to keep walking through it. One choice at a time." She turned to him, then, eyes red but clear. "Why does she trust me?" Her voice trembled. "Your daughter. She falls asleep on me. She clings. She's safe." "Because you are," Luke said, "even if you don't see it." A knock shattered the quiet. Nora flinched. Luke froze. They exchanged a glance before Nora moved cautiously to the door. She looked through the peephole. Her posture stiffened. "Stay here," she said sharply. "Nora, please." She opened the door only a few inches, just enough to reveal a man bundled in snow gear, his breath puffing in the cold. He removed his hat. Gray hair, clean-shaven, mid-60s. "Nora," he said. "It's been a long time." Her voice was cold steel. "Dr. Reinhardt, what do you want? I heard from town dispatch there's a newborn out here, and someone said you'd opened your door. I don't answer to Ridge Hollow gossip." Reinhardt's tone softened. "I'm not here to judge, just to make sure everyone's safe, including you." "I'm fine. You're holding an infant. Without a medical license, I haven't touched a chart or prescribed anything." "You know how delicate this is," he warned. "You step too close to a line and it won't just be you who pays." Nora narrowed her eyes. "Is that a threat?" "No. It's a reminder. One that comes with this." He reached into his coat and held out a white envelope. "It's a petition. From the board. They've reopened your case. On appeal." She didn't take the envelope. He placed it gently on the porch rail instead. "I don't know what happened here," Reinhardt said, "but people are starting to talk. If there's a baby in danger—" "She's not in danger," Nora snapped. The man studied her face and something in his softened. "Then show them that. You know how." He stepped back. "And Nora, I never stopped believing in you. But no one can walk alone forever." He turned and disappeared into the snow. Nora closed the door slowly. Luke stepped out of the hallway, having heard everything. "Are we in trouble?" he asked. She shook her head, but not convincingly. "Not yet, but the road's starting to thaw, which means the world is coming back. And when it does, everything changes." Luke glanced toward the bassinet where Gracie now stirred. Then maybe we don't wait for it. Maybe we choose how it comes back. Nora's fingers curled around the envelope she hadn't opened. I'll sleep on the couch tonight, Luke offered. If you want the baby in your room. She looked at him. Why would you do that? He shrugged. Because she reaches for you in her sleep. And I think maybe that means something. Nora didn't reply, but she didn't say no either. That night, as she carried Gracie gently down the hall, Luke lay on the couch listening to the creak of floorboards and the soft click of a door closing. She was still afraid, still doubting, but she hadn't locked the door, and maybe that, too, meant something. The scream tore through the cabin like a lightning strike. Nora bolted upright in bed, heart slamming against her ribs. For one disoriented second, she thought it was the past coming back, the Haitian clinic, the sound of grief too raw to forget. But then she heard it again this time, clearer, closer. Gracie. She threw off the quilt and flung the bedroom door open. Luke was hunched over the bassinet in the living room, his body shaking. His voice was hoarse, panicked. She's not breathing right. She's not. Nora crossed the room in 2 strides, dropping to her knees beside him. Gracie's face was pale lips, tinted blue. Her tiny chest heaved in uneven spurts. Give her to me, Nora said, already rolling up her sleeves. Luke's hands trembled as he passed the infant over. She was fine. I put her down like you showed me. I didn't do anything wrong. I swear, Luke, she said, calm but firm. I need space. Step back. He obeyed, breath ragged. Nora placed Gracie on a folded towel on the rug. Instinct kicked in clean lines, sharp steps. Tilt the head, monitor the chest, check the airway. She's not fully apneic, Nora muttered. But it's close. She moved fast. Infant CPR. 2 fingers on the chest, soft, rhythmic compressions. Then she adjusted Gracie's position and gave 2 delicate rescue breaths. Come on, sweetheart, she whispered. Come on. Luke crouched nearby, fists clenched, tears streaming down his cheeks. Please, he whispered. Please, God. Gracie let out a wet, rattling cough. Then another. Then a weak cry. Nora didn't move for a full 5 seconds, watching, listening, confirming. Then she scooped Gracie up and pressed the baby against her chest. The child's breathing stabilized, slow and shallow but steady. Warmth crept back into her cheeks. Luke collapsed into the wall behind him, covering his face. The silence that followed was not peace, it was stunned relief. She's okay, Nora said softly, eyes still locked on Gracie. It was likely a delayed reaction to that fever she had yesterday, possibly an underdeveloped respiratory reflex. But we got to her in time. Luke looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You saved her. I responded to a symptom. No, he said, shaking his head. You saved her. I didn't know what to do. I froze. I just kept calling her name like it was going to fix something. She turned toward him. You didn't freeze. You got me. That's what saved her. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The fire had gone out, leaving only the soft crackle of cooling embers and the sound of Gracie's breath against Nora's collarbone. Luke broke the silence first. You still remember everything. I never forgot, she said quietly. I just stopped trusting myself with it. He nodded slowly. She trusts you. Even when I didn't. Even when you didn't. Nora exhaled a shaky breath full of the weight of old ghosts. You can't run from the past. Believe me, I've tried. Luke's voice was rough but clear. Maybe you don't have to run. Maybe you just need someone to walk through it with you. Nora looked down at Gracie, now asleep again, one tiny hand resting against her neck. Her lips trembled. I don't know if I can carry it all. You don't have to, he said, but maybe you don't have to carry it alone. For the first time since they met, she didn't have a retort. No boundary, no wall, just silence. And then a quiet nod. An hour later, after Nora had settled Gracie back in the warmed bassinet and Luke had built the fire back up, they sat across from each other in the dim glow of the flames. I used to think I could handle anything, Nora said, staring into the hearth. I went into medicine because I wanted to matter in the places no one else wanted to go. I thought if I stayed long enough, worked hard enough, I could undo the world's cruelty. But then one life slipped through my hands, and the shame of it. She swallowed. I didn't think I deserved to try again. Luke nodded slowly. Madeline, my wife, used to say something that stuck with me. She said, "Sometimes the bravest thing isn't saving everyone. It's staying soft enough to keep showing up after you couldn't." Nora's eyes welled. She turned her face slightly away, but not before he saw it. "Your wife sounds like she was a force." She was, and gentle. That's what made her dangerous in all the right ways. There was a long pause, warm and weighty. Then Luke asked, "Did you mean what you said earlier, about being able to help Gracie if milk doesn't come from anywhere else?" Nora hesitated. "I've read about induced lactation," she said. "It's rare, difficult, but not impossible, and I might already be responding hormonally. It's something that happens in extreme cases even to non-birth mothers when the bond is strong enough." Luke blinked. "So, she's responding to you. I don't know if it's physiological or emotional, but she reaches for me, yes." Luke looked down at his hands. "She's never had that. Not even from me." "Not really. I've just been trying not to drop her." "You haven't dropped her," Nora said softly. "You found the warmest light in a blizzard and walked toward it." He looked up. "I didn't know it was yours." She gave a small smile. "Neither did I." That night, as the snow began to melt in soft drips from the roof, Nora stayed awake again. But this time, it wasn't guilt that kept her up. It was choice. She sat by the bassinet, one hand resting lightly near Gracie's and a folded envelope beside her, the one from Dr. Reinhardt, unopened still. Her phone buzzed quietly. A message from an old colleague saw your name pop up on the appeal list. "If you're ready, we'll be here." Nora stared at the screen for a moment, then slowly closed it. She wasn't ready yet, but she wasn't running anymore. The snow had begun to melt in earnest. Outside the cabin, the world dripped. Branches sighed under the lessening weight of frost, and the dirt road leading away from Willow Creek glistened like a thawed artery, muddy but passable. The silence of survival had given way to the slow stirrings of something more uncertain life resuming. Inside the house, Luke stood barefoot in the kitchen whisking eggs in an old ceramic bowl. The baby monitor, a second-hand one Nora dug out from a drawer, crackled faintly behind him on the counter. It wasn't high-tech, but it worked. Every small gurgle from the nursery filled the cabin like a heartbeat. He had never cooked breakfast for anyone but himself and Madeline. And now, here he was, cracking eggs and burning toast for a woman who had saved his daughter's life. A woman who had once vanished into grief and was only now reappearing one choice at a time. The door creaked. Nora stepped into the room, hair damp from a morning shower sleeves rolled past her elbows. Her face was softer today. Not smiling exactly, but unguarded. The light in her eyes had shifted from constant watchfulness to something Luke couldn't quite name. Not ease, but maybe permission. "You're up early," she said. Gracie was making those little gremlin noises. "I figured I'd let you sleep." Nora raised an eyebrow as she poured coffee. "So you rewarded me with the scent of burned toast." Luke laughed. "Be grateful. I almost made pancakes." She sat at the small wooden table, watching him work. "You know you've been here a week." He turned. "Yeah, I've been counting." "I haven't let someone into this house for more than an hour in 4 years," she said. "Not even delivery people." Luke leaned against the counter, whisk still in hand. "You want me gone?" "No," she said simply. "But I want to be honest about the edges of this thing." "This thing," he echoed. "Whatever's growing in here," she said, gesturing vaguely around the kitchen, the house, the air between them. "It feels like it matters. And that scares me." Luke considered that. "You think it scares me less?" She looked down at her mug. I think you're used to fear. I think you carry it like people carry keys." He chuckled. "Fair." A few moments passed in companionable silence as he plated the scrambled eggs and handed her a fork. "I've been thinking Nora said between bites about using the study." Luke tilted his head. "For what?" "Restarting something. Not the clinic, not yet, but maybe offering pediatric CPR classes. First aid for new parents. That kind of thing. Quiet work, human work." He smiled. "That sounds incredible. I don't know if I'm ready to touch a hospital again. But if I can help someone keep their baby breathing on a night like ours." "You'd be giving people the very thing we needed that night," Luke said. A steady hand in chaos. She nodded. "Exactly." Luke stepped away to check on Gracie, who was stirring in the bassinet near the living room window. Sunlight streamed through the glass, dappled and golden. He lifted her gently, cradling her in one arm as he returned. "She's warm," he said. "Skin looks good. Breathing's even." Nora touched the baby's forehead briefly, her fingers expert but tender. "She trusts you now." "I think she trusts you more," Luke said. "She calms down faster in your arms." "She knows I won't run," Nora said quietly. Luke sat beside her, Gracie between them, now swaddled and sleepy. "Have you thought more about the appeal?" "The envelope." "It's still on my dresser," she admitted. "Unopened." "Why?" "Because I don't know if I'm her anymore," she said. "The woman who used to work 15-hour shifts and hold parents' hands as they said goodbye. I'm not sure if that person is still alive." "She's not," Luke said gently. "But maybe someone better is." Nora looked at him, caught off guard. "Better." "You're not performing medicine anymore, Nora. You're living it. You're holding one baby. You're not rushing. You're listening. That matters." She swallowed hard. "Do you think I could really do it again? Work again. Heal others." Luke placed his hand over hers. "You already are." A long silence settled between them. Then Nora leaned slightly toward him, her shoulder brushing his. "I was angry," she said, "for so long. At the world. At myself. At that child's mother. At the system. At the silence that came after." "I know the silence," Luke replied. "Madeline was the one who made the world loud and full. When she was gone, I didn't know what to do with the quiet." And now he looked down at Gracie, who yawned and stretched her fingers toward Nora's blouse. Luke smiled. "Now it's full again, but softer, like something sacred lives in the quiet." They sat that way for a while. 3 people in one room, no longer lost, no longer surviving, but healing. Outside, a pair of tire tracks appeared on the melting road as a postal truck trundled past, honking, once then continuing on. It was the first sign of the outside world in days. Nora didn't flinch. That afternoon, Luke helped clear the shed behind the house while Nora unpacked dusty books and old medical kits. She wiped them clean-labeled drawers and laid out materials in neat rows. Not because she had to, but because the act of readiness was itself a kind of hope. By dusk, a handmade sign hung by the door: Willow Creek Infant Care and CPR Basics. Free. Call ahead. Luke stood beside her, reading it aloud. "You sure I'm not who I was?" she said. "But I'm someone now, and that's enough." He looked at her with quiet admiration. "You're not alone anymore, you know." She turned her eyes, softening. "Neither are you." As the sun set beyond the snow-lined ridge, the house on Willow Creek glowed not just with warmth, but with purpose. Not the old kind that demands perfection, but the kind that shows up day after day for those who need it. And for the first time in years, the door stayed open not out of obligation, but because healing had found its way home. The knock came just before noon. It wasn't loud, just 3 short raps, but in the stillness of Willow Creek it was enough to stop everything. Luke paused mid-diaper change, glancing toward the front door with an instinctive tightness in his chest. Gracie, now stronger and more vocal, kicked her feet against the changing pad and let out a squeaky protest. From across the room, Nora stood frozen by the wood stove, one hand wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. Her eyes didn't move to the door, they moved to Luke. "You expecting someone?" she asked, voice low. He shook his head. "No one even knows we're here." The knock came again, firmer this time. Nora put her mug down slowly. "Stay with her." She moved toward the door with deliberate, calm shoulders set, but Luke saw it. Her left hand trembled as it reached for the lock. When she cracked the door open, sunlight poured in along with a gust of wind and the presence of someone else, someone official. A woman stood on the porch mid-40s in a tailored coat and practical boots. Her badge was visible on her hip and her expression was polite, but professionally detached. "Good afternoon. I'm Tessa Connors with Oregon Child and Family Services." Nora's breath caught. "Is there a problem?" "May I come in?" Luke had already scooped Gracie up and moved to the living room doorway. "What's going on?" Tessa offered a small smile. "We received a report. An anonymous concern about a child residing here without legal guardianship or access to medical care. I'm here to follow up, that's all." Luke's heart pounded. "We're not hiding. We're surviving." "I understand," Tessa said gently. "This isn't a removal visit. It's an assessment." "May I sit down?" Nora opened the door wider without a word. Tessa entered and took a seat near the fireplace, pulling a small notepad from her coat. She spoke with a kind of rehearsed calm, the tone of someone trained to diffuse tension, but also to extract truth. "How long have you been here with the child?" Luke answered. 12 days, and your relation to her, I'm her father, Gracie Henderson." Tessa nodded. "And the mother? Passed during childbirth?" "I'm sorry." She made a note, then looked up. "Are you currently employed?" "I was. Lost the job when I had to leave to care for her. But I've applied for reinstatement with Ridge Hollow Fire Services. I have an interview next week." Tessa made another note, then turned to Nora. "And your name, Nora Winslow." Tessa paused, recognition flickering behind her eyes. "Your yes." Nora interrupted, steady but firm. "I'm that Nora Winslow, former physician, suspended license, living off-grid. You've probably read the rest. I'm not here to judge Ms. Winslow, but you should know, your involvement complicates this. I'm not claiming guardianship," Nora said. "I'm helping, feeding, monitoring, supporting." Luke stepped forward. "She saved Gracie's life. Twice. She's not a danger, she's the reason my daughter's still breathing." Tessa looked at the baby who gurgled happily in his arms. Then she turned to Nora again. "You may be under formal review by the state board, but legally you're not certified to provide medical treatment." "I haven't practiced medicine," Nora said, "but I've done what any decent human being would do when a child is in crisis." There was steel in her voice, and something more, dignity not defense. Tessa nodded, writing again. Then she said, "I'm not here to dismantle what's happening here. Honestly, this is one of the most emotionally stable, safe environments I've stepped into in weeks." Luke blinked. "Then, what's the problem?" "The problem," Tessa said gently, "is the law, and how fast things can turn when the right boxes aren't checked." She pulled out a small manila folder and slid it across the table toward Luke. "This is a notice. Temporary guardianship investigation initiated automatically due to the anonymous complaint. You have 14 days to present documentation proving stable housing income and access to certified pediatric care." Luke felt the words land like stones in his gut. "If I don't?" he asked. Tessa looked him straight in the eyes. "Then custody of Gracie will be reviewed by the county." The room went still. Nora stood up. "No." Tessa turned. "Excuse me. You can't take that baby," Nora said. "Not after what she's been through. Not after what he's been through." "Ms. Winslow." "No, listen to me," she said, her voice rising, not hysterical but passionate. "He's a good father, a damn good one. I've watched him learn to feed, bathe, soothe, and protect her. He's exhausted and scared and still shows up, and I've seen what not showing up does. Tessa stood slowly. I'm not the enemy here. I know, Nora said, voice lowering again. But if you remove that child, you won't just be disrupting a household. You'll be breaking something that's finally starting to heal. Tessa took a long breath. Then, surprisingly, she sat back down. I don't want to remove her, she said, but I need help convincing the system not to. If either of you has a path to making this legal through employment or medical support or legal guardianship, you need to use it. Now. She looked pointedly at Nora. Are you willing to sign a limited custodial declaration as emergency medical guardian? Nora's throat worked. Her voice came softly. I have to be. Tessa nodded. Then we may have a path forward. She stood again and handed Nora a separate form. If you submit this within 72 hours, we can pause the review process. But you'll need backing reference letters, local support, and, ideally, medical reinstatement proceedings. Nora glanced toward the envelope still on her dresser. The appeal, the one she hadn't opened. Luke watched her barely breathing. And then, slowly, deliberately, Nora nodded. I'll sign it, she said, and I'll open the envelope tonight. Tessa gave a small warm smile. Then I'll do what I can to buy you both time. She left quietly, leaving behind only papers and tension. Luke sat on the couch, Gracie in his arms, silent for a long while. Nora stood by the door staring at the now closed world beyond it. That was close, he murmured. She turned. It's not over. No, he said. But it's not over for us anymore. That's different. Nora crossed the room and sat beside him. She leaned slightly toward his shoulder, just enough for their arms to touch. Then let's make it count, she whispered. Outside, the last icicle on the porch cracked and fell. Night fell heavy over Willow Creek, wrapping the cabin in a stillness that felt different this time, not born of isolation, but of expectation. The storm was over. The roads were open. The world was moving again. But inside the house, everything felt suspended. Nora sat at her bedroom desk, a single lamp casting a warm circle of light around the unopened envelope from the medical board. It sat in front of her like a verdict, like a dare. On the corner of the desk lay the guardianship declaration form from Tessa Connors, filled out but unsigned. All it needed was a pen stroke. Down the hall, Luke was singing softly to Gracie. She fussed in a new way these days, more willful, more expressive. It made him smile even as he bounced her through the long shadows of the nursery. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was becoming. Nora rested her fingers on the edge of the desk and closed her eyes. She could still hear the last words Tessa had spoken before leaving. No one's asking you to fix everything. Just don't walk away. She'd walked away from so much. From the clinics, from medicine, from people who believed in her, from the woman she used to be. And now, a baby of father had stumbled through her door and given her something no one else had managed to, a reason to stay. She opened the envelope. Her heart pounded as she scanned the printed letter inside. The board was offering a reinstatement pathway conditional. 6 months of supervision, regular reviews, limited scope of practice, but it was a door, cracked open. It wasn't shame that welled in her eyes, it was relief. Not because they'd forgiven her, but because now she might learn to forgive herself. Luke was pacing the hallway when Nora appeared. She held the envelope in one hand, the guardianship form in the other. Her eyes met his steadier than he'd ever seen them. I read it, she said, and they're giving me a chance. If I want it, he nodded, breath held, and I want it, she added. Luke let out a slow, visible exhale. That's good. Nora hesitated, but it's not just about going back. It's about staying. Here, for this, for her. She handed him the signed form. Luke stared at her signature at the bottom next to the line labeled Designated Emergency Medical Guardian. His throat tightened. You sure, he asked. "I'm not doing this to be noble," she said. "I'm doing it because I've never wanted to protect something more than I want to protect her. And maybe that means protecting you too." His eyes burned. He blinked fast. "I'm not used to people showing up. Not after Maddie. People said nice things, dropped off lasagna, but no one stayed. I'm not most people," she said. A soft smile formed at the corner of his mouth. "No, you're not." She looked at him, then truly looked and saw it all the weight he carried, the vulnerability and his exhaustion, the way his love for Gracie bled through every word and gesture. "I want to help you build a life here," she said. "Not just survive day to day. A real life. With roots." He stepped closer, voice quieter. "Even if it's messy. Especially if it's messy." They stood like that, a breath apart, as Gracie let out a sleepy coo from the nursery. Luke looked toward the sound, then back at her. "You want to hold her." "I always want to hold her," Nora whispered. Later that night, Nora rocked Gracie gently on the front porch, bundled in layers against the late winter chill. The stars were out sharp and bright above the trees, and the last remnants of ice melted beneath their boots. Luke came out with 2 mugs of tea, handing one to her. "She's almost asleep," Nora murmured. He watched her, the way Gracie's hand curled against the edge of her coat, the way Nora instinctively leaned into the curve of the baby's weight. It didn't look like someone pretending to be a mother. It looked like someone becoming one. "I used to think my job was to fix everything she said, to be the answer. But maybe all we can do is be someone's constant. The one who stays." Luke nodded. "You already are." They sat on the porch steps, shoulder to shoulder, mugs warm between their palms, while the world slowly remembered how to spin again. Behind them, the light from the cabin spilled golden through the windows, framing the edges of a home neither of them had planned for, but both had begun to claim. Nora turned to him. "You're going to get the job you know." At the firehouse, she nodded. "They need someone like you. And Gracie needs a father who remembers how to keep fighting." He tilted his head. "And what do you need?" She smiled faintly. "To be reminded that redemption isn't earned in one grand gesture. It's in every small deliberate decision to stay when you could have left." Luke was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, "I'm staying." "I know." They watched the stars in silence, a family slowly forming beneath a sky vast enough to hold both their pain and their hope. Tomorrow would bring paperwork, hearings, job interviews. The world would push back demand answers, inspect their lives. But tonight there was just this porch, a child. 2 people who had once been broken and now, almost imperceptibly, were beginning to mend. Together. The courthouse in Ridge Hollow wasn't imposing, more of a converted town hall than a seat of law. The old wooden floors creaked beneath every step, and the heat struggled to reach the corners of the room. But to Luke, walking in with Gracie in his arms and Nora just behind him, it felt like the weight of the entire world was pressing on his shoulders. This was the hearing, the one that would decide whether he could keep his daughter. The clerk at the front desk, a woman in her 60s with bifocals and a warm but tired face, directed them toward a modest hearing room. It wasn't grand, a long oak table, a judge's bench, 2 rows of chairs. The walls were lined with faded county maps and a flag that looked like it hadn't been touched since the Clinton administration. Nora smoothed her jacket as they entered. It was the first time Luke had seen her wear anything close to professional attire. Her hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail. Her face was calm, but beneath it he sensed the tension. They were here to fight for something bigger than legality. They were here for family. Gracie fussed softly, and Luke whispered to her, "We've got this baby girl. We've got you." The door opened again, and Tessa Connors stepped in, nodding once to them with a tight smile. She'd become more than a social worker to them over the past few days. She'd become an advocate. Someone who saw past the boxes and forms. Behind her, the judge entered. Judge Esther Callahan was in her early 70s, sharp-eyed and slow-moving, with a presence that could hush a room with a glance. She took her seat, adjusted her glasses, and surveyed them with quiet interest. "We're here today for a temporary custody review concerning Gracie Henderson," she began. "Let's proceed." Tessa rose. "Your Honor, we've reviewed the living situation, interviewed both individuals present, and conducted an on-site evaluation. Mr. Henderson is the biological father. Ms. Winslow has signed a declaration as emergency medical guardian with the intention of petitioning for reinstatement of her medical license. Both have shown consistent care for the child." Judge Callahan raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Winslow. That name rings familiar." Nora stood. "Yes, Your Honor. I lost a patient under my care in Haiti 4 years ago. A child. It triggered a public investigation and eventually the suspension of my license. I chose to step away rather than fight it at the time." The judge folded her hands. "And now you're choosing to step back in." "Yes," Nora said clearly. "Because for the first time since that day, I'm not afraid of showing up again." Callahan looked at her for a long moment. "You were a gifted physician according to your file. Highly commended. I was also a deeply broken one. But this child—" Nora motioned toward Gracie. "She didn't just need me. I needed her. She reminded me that even after failure you can choose to be useful again." Luke swallowed the lump in his throat. There was no embellishment in Nora's voice, only honesty threaded with humility and hope. "And you, Mr. Henderson," the judge asked, "why haven't you sought formal guardianship arrangements earlier?" "I was drowning, Your Honor," Luke replied. "I lost my wife. I lost my job. I lost our apartment. All I had left was our daughter and the will to keep her safe. I didn't come to this court because I was too proud. I came because I finally found someone who helped me believe I could be enough." The judge studied him. "Your Honor," Tessa added gently, "in my 15 years of family services, I've never seen a situation where a broken family rebuilt itself from scratch with this much intention, love, and mutual care. They're doing this the right way." Judge Callahan tapped a pen against her desk, then looked up. "You're asking for what exactly temporary guardianship to remain with Mr. Henderson," Tessa said. "With Ms. Winslow listed as emergency medical custodian with full disclosure to the board. We request reevaluation in 90 days." The judge leaned back, eyes flicking between Luke and Nora. Then she nodded. "Granted, but with conditions." Luke's heart stopped. Callahan continued. "You'll need documented proof of employment by next review stable housing for 6 months and confirmation from the medical board that Ms. Winslow's reinstatement is in process. Any lapse in care and we revisit this." Luke exhaled. "Yes, Your Honor." "Absolutely," Nora added. "We understand. Thank you." Gracie let out a small hiccup and the judge smiled faintly. "She seems healthy. Bright-eyed." "She is," Luke said proudly. "She's a fighter." Callahan stood. "Then let's make sure she never has to fight alone again." As they left the room, Luke turned to Nora, stunned but relieved. "You did it," he said. She shook her head. "We did it." Outside the courthouse, the light hit them full in the face. Warm, golden, unfiltered. It felt like the season had shifted while they'd been inside. They didn't speak as they reached the car. Luke carefully strapped Gracie into the back seat while Nora leaned against the passenger door, watching him with quiet awe. He straightened, glanced at her, and smiled. "Want to go celebrate?" She arched an eyebrow. "In Ridge Hollow. We'll be lucky to find a diner that's still open." He laughed. "Then we'll celebrate the only way that counts. By going home." She nodded, her voice soft. "Yeah, let's go home." As they drove back through the hills, past thawing roads and slowly greening trees, Nora reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small card, the one the board had included in her appeal packet. She stared at the number on it for a long moment. Then she dialed. "Hello," came a voice on the other end. "This is Dr. Nora Winslow," she said, her voice sure and clear. "I'm ready to return." Gracie gurgled in the back seat, and Luke reached over to rest a hand briefly over Nora's. She didn't flinch. She curled her fingers around his. Together they drove on toward the house that had given them all a second chance. The welcome mat outside the house on Willow Creek had been faded for years, its lettering long worn away by Oregon rains and snow. But that morning, Luke stepped out onto the porch and bent down to shake it clean. For the first time, he wasn't just trying to survive in someone else's space, he was preparing it. Inside, Gracie squealed from the living room floor where she lay swaddled and alert arms flailing with purpose. She had started focusing her gaze more directly these days, eyes darting between faces with recognition than wonder. Her cheeks were fuller, her cry stronger, her presence unmistakable. Nora crouched beside her on a playmat Luke had found second-hand in town. She wore jeans and a soft blue sweater, her hair pulled into a loose braid clipboard in hand as she organized a tray of pediatric CPR supplies. They had opened the house just a crack. A handwritten flyer posted at the town diner had offered free infant care education every Friday afternoon. No questions, no insurance, just guidance. This Friday would be their first. Luke stepped back in, shaking off the morning chill. "Porch is cleared, roads drying fast," he said, walking toward Nora. "Firehouse called. They want me to start Monday." She looked up and he saw the flicker of something unfamiliar cross her face. Pride. "I knew they'd take you," she said softly. "I don't even own a uniform anymore." "I can sew patches," she offered with a smirk. Luke chuckled, then looked around. "This place looks good. Feels different." "It is different," Nora said. "You made it feel like a home." He gave her a look. We both did. Before she could reply, the front door opened. Tessa Connors stepped inside, shaking a light rain off her coat. "Hope I'm not early." "Right on time," Nora said. Tessa's eyes swept the room, the freshly cleaned floorboards, the small toy bin, the folded pamphlets on safe infant sleep positions. "This is incredible," she said. "You've really turned this around." "We had help," Luke replied, offering her a chair. Tessa took a seat and pulled out her file folder. "Just need to check in officially. Confirm employment status, verify space for child services, and conduct one more informal wellness assessment." "You're welcome to stay as long as you need," Nora said. Gracie let out a gurgling sound and Tessa smiled. She looked strong. Feeding's improved. No more breathing anomalies. Weight's up. No signs of distress. Nora said, the medical rhythm returning to her voice. Tessa looked up impressed. "Are you charting again?" "Just personal records for now," Nora replied. "But I've submitted my board reinstatement paperwork. I'll start supervised hours at the community clinic in 2 weeks." "That's a fast return," Tessa said. "I've had 4 years of silence," Nora replied. "I'm done with silence." Tessa wrote something down, then looked between them. "This house, this child, it's not just safe, it's anchored, and not many families can say that. Even fewer can build it from the ashes." Luke shifted in his seat. "We're not perfect." "Perfect isn't the goal," Tessa said. "Stable, loving, intentional. That's what matters. That's what lasts." She stood, gathering her things. "Consider this my last official visit unless you want me to stop by as a friend." Nora gave a soft, grateful smile. "We'd like that." As Tessa stepped out and closed the door behind her, Nora turned toward Luke. "You okay?" He nodded slowly. "I think I am." She studied him. "You don't look relieved. You look quiet." "Because it's hitting me," he said. "This life, the one I didn't think I deserved after losing Maddie, it's real now. It's not just something we stumbled into." Nora moved closer. "It's something we chose, one scared choice at a time." He looked down. "Sometimes I still feel like I'm waiting to be disqualified." "You aren't," she said firmly. He met her eyes. "And you? Do you ever worry you'll fall back into who you used to be?" All the time, she admitted. "But I remind myself every day that healing doesn't mean erasing what happened. It means refusing to let it define who you are now. She reached down, lifted Gracie gently from the mat, and held her against her chest. The baby curled into her instinctively, no longer tentative, completely, irrevocably trusting. Luke watched the two of them, his throat tight. "She loves you," he whispered. "I love her," Nora replied. She looked up. "And I love what we've built here." Luke stepped forward. There wasn't hesitation in his movements anymore, no uncertainty in his reach. He wrapped his arms around both of them, and for a moment they simply stood there, the three of them, in a home that had once belonged to shadows. "You know what I want to do," he murmured into Nora's hair. "What I want to carve something into the door." She laughed. "What, like initials in a heart?" "No," he said, grinning. "Just 4 words." She pulled back slightly. "What words?" He gestured toward the front door. Nora stepped over, opened it, and saw the fresh carving in the old wood etched with careful hands. "This house chose us." She stared at it, her throat thick. "It did," she said softly. "And we said yes." The wind rustled through the trees. Gracie murmured against her shoulder, and Luke wrapped an arm around them both. Beyond the door, the world waited with its questions and its noise. But within the walls of Willow Creek, a new kind of quiet had taken root. Not the quiet of retreat, the quiet of peace. Spring arrived quietly in Ridge Hollow. No dramatic fanfare. No sudden bloom. Just the subtle shift of light through the evergreens, the steady retreat of frost from the earth, and the kind of warmth that crept in slowly like healing itself. At the house on Willow Creek, everything had changed, though nothing looked extraordinary from the outside. The cabin was still small, still rustic. The gravel driveway still crunched under the weight of Luke's old truck. But inside, it felt entirely new. Alive. On a Saturday morning, the sun spilled through the front windows in soft, amber streaks. Gracie sat upright now, propped by pillows, a soft rattle in her hands and a determined pout on her face as she tried to bite it. She was 7 weeks old, and her eyes tracked movement with hawk-like intensity. She had a laugh now, brief and sharp and pure, and she saved it for rare moments like when Luke tickled her toes or when Nora sang slightly off-key on purpose. Luke stood in the kitchen flipping pancakes in a skillet that had seen better decades. Behind him, Nora moved with practiced grace, her hands arranging cups and silverware, a small stack of files beside her untouched. "Clinic called this morning," she said, placing a mug of coffee near him. "They've approved my supervised hours. I start Tuesday." He grinned. "I hope they know what they're getting into." "They're getting someone who folds baby laundry between patient calls," she replied. "It's a package deal now." Luke turned eyes, locking with hers. "How do you feel?" "Terrified," she admitted. Then added, hopeful. He leaned against the counter, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "We're really doing this." "We are," she said. "And not just this. All of it." They ate breakfast around the old kitchen table, the same table where Nora had once drawn invisible boundaries between them. Now she reached across it easily, brushing a crumb from Luke's cheek while Gracie babbled beside them in her bouncer seat, completely unaware she'd ever been the center of such a fragile beginning. After the dishes were done and the baby settled into her morning nap, Luke disappeared into the shed and returned carrying a small wooden plaque. Hand-sanded, hand-carved. Nora raised an eyebrow. More door carvings. "This one's for the nursery." She took it gently, her fingers tracing the letters etched into the oak loved long before you knew it. Nora swallowed hard. "I wanted Gracie to grow up knowing Luke said, that even when it felt like no one was ready for her, she was already chosen, already safe." Nora reached for his hand. "You didn't just choose her, Luke. You saved her. And me." He met her eyes. "You saved both of us." There was a long pause. Not silence, but fullness. Then Luke cleared his throat. "I was thinking, if you're open to it, maybe someday we could make this official." Nora blinked. "Official." "You know," he said, suddenly bashful, "legal. Permanent. Not just two people living under one roof trying to fix the past, but building something new. Her eyes didn't water so much as soften, like something inside her exhaled. "I've never wanted a family," she said. "Not because I didn't believe in it, but because I didn't think I deserved one." Luke stepped closer. And now, she looked over at Gracie sleeping peacefully under a light knit blanket, a faint smile on her lips. "Now I know that family isn't something you earn, it's something you grow into. The same way light finds its way into a cracked room." Luke kissed her softly, fully, as if no part of him doubted anymore. That evening they invited Tessa and a few neighbors over for a simple gathering: coffee, pie, a second-hand bassinet pushed into the corner of the room. No speeches, no announcements, just warmth. Laughter filled the house for the first time in years. One of the elderly neighbors brought a handmade quilt as a gift. Tessa helped set out paper cups. Gracie, as if sensing the communal joy, stayed awake longer than usual, bright-eyed and cooing. Later, as the guests filtered out and the stars emerged above the trees, Luke stepped out onto the porch with Gracie in his arms. The air smelled of earth and cedar. The wind was soft now, not cruel. He bounced her gently as she blinked up at the sky. Nora joined him a few minutes later, sliding her arm through his. "You think she'll remember this?" He smiled. "No, but she'll feel it. The safety, the stillness, the fact that no one ran." They stood together watching as the trees rustled in the dusk. After a while, Nora whispered, "I think we were all waiting to be rescued." Luke looked at her. "And we did." She shook her head. "No, we didn't get rescued. We rescued each other." Gracie stirred in his arms, her tiny hand curling around his finger. And that's when Luke realized the house hadn't saved them. They had saved the house, filled it, reclaimed it, transformed it into a place that didn't just hold memories but created new ones. A place that whispered, "You're safe now. You're home?" Somewhere deep in the night, long after Gracie had fallen asleep and the porch lights had dimmed, Luke stepped into the nursery one last time. Nora was already inside, leaning over the crib. He watched her for a moment before saying softly, "You're the mother she needed." Nora didn't look at him, but her hand reached behind her and he took it. "I didn't give her life," she whispered, "but maybe. I gave her the space to grow into it." Luke squeezed her hand. That's what love is. And in the house that once belonged to grief, only love remained. Single Dad answered a knock at 2 a.m. She was shivering gorgeous and said, "You feel familiar." The wine glasses clinked like fragile nerves as a string quartet played in perfect soulless harmony. From the outside it was a perfect evening, white candles flickering in tall crystal vases, a $1,000 cake poised to be cut, guests glittering with borrowed charm. But Isabelle LaRue was drowning in silk and silence. She stood beside her fiancé, Andrew Harrington III, whose smile was carved from polished ambition. His hand rested on the small of her back, too firm, too practiced. She smiled politely at the crowd gathered in the rooftop ballroom of Manhattan's most exclusive hotel, but her fingers trembled against the flute of champagne. Then her phone buzzed, a single message. From a junior legal associate she once mentored someone brave or foolish enough to tell her the truth. Prenup redline updated. Hidden clause, all holdings to transfer to Harrington Ventures upon marriage dissolution. He's covering his tracks fast. Thought you should know. For one perfect breaking second, the room stilled. Isabel blinked. Once. Twice. The chandeliers above blurred the room, stretched and curved around her. Andrew leaned in, still smiling for the crowd. Ready to be Mrs. Harrington. Her mouth was dry. She placed the glass down slowly. "Excuse me," she whispered, already turning. "Where are you going?" he asked under his breath, fingers tightening on her wrist. She pulled away. "I need air." She didn't wait, didn't think. Her heels clicked across marble past shocked guests, past murmurs and confused glances through gilded doors and out into the icy Manhattan night. Outside, the city was muffled under snow, the kind of snow that swallowed sound and logic. Her breath came fast. Her skin stung in the open air. Bare shoulders, thin dress, no coat, no phone. She walked blindly past the black SUVs waiting by the curb, past the valet shouting her name. The sequins on her dress caught the light of passing taxis like fallen stars, but no one stopped. No one recognized the woman who'd once graced the cover of Forbes Women to Watch under 35. Tonight, she was just a runaway bride with frozen fingers and something broken behind her ribs. She walked for blocks, heels snapping against icy sidewalks until one cracked beneath her. She fell hard, scraping her palm and tearing the side of her gown. She sat on the pavement, blinking at the snow, her breath catching in her chest. And then she laughed. It came out like a choke, half sob, half surrender. The snow was coming down harder now, clinging to her lashes, her lips, her disbelief. There was nowhere to go. Her feet led her away from the city's glossy facade down quieter streets, older blocks. Eventually, she wandered into a neighborhood where porch lights burned a little warmer, where homes still had paint that chipped and fences that leaned. She stopped in front of a small single-story house with a flickering porch light and a child's drawing taped crookedly in the front window. There was no reason for her to choose it, except that it didn't feel cold. She climbed the short steps and knocked once, twice, 3 times. Then she sagged against the doorframe, her body shivering violently now, lips, numb arms wrapped around herself. Her skin throbbed from the fall, but that wasn't what hurt. The door opened. A man stood in the doorway, late 30s, rough around the edges in a hoodie and worn jeans. His hair was messy, his jaw stubbled, and he blinked at her like he hadn't yet decided if she was real, or a ghost made of snow and regret. She tried to smile. "I'm sorry. I didn't know where else to go." He looked past her down the street, then back. "Are you hurt? She nodded toward her scraped arm. "Not really. Just lost. I'm not here to cause trouble. Her voice cracked. "You feel familiar. I don't know why." His eyes narrowed. He stepped outside, instinctively wrapping an arm around her shoulders to guide her in. Inside, the warmth wrapped around her like a quilt. There was a small couch, a cluttered coffee table with crayon drawings and juice boxes. A slow lullaby hummed from a baby monitor on the counter. He gently sat her on the couch and grabbed a blanket from the armrest. "I'll get you some tea. Don't go passing out, okay?" She managed a faint nod. The man disappeared into the kitchen and she let her eyes wander the room. There were family photos, just the man and a little girl with curly hair and wide eyes. No sign of a woman. No glamour. No lies. He returned with tea and a first aid kit. "I'm Daniel," he said, kneeling to clean her scrape. "You got a name?" She hesitated. "Belle." A pause. He didn't push. "You're lucky it was my house," he said. "Anyone else might have called the cops. I wouldn't blame them." He looked up. His eyes were kind but guarded. People don't just knock on a stranger's door at 2 a.m., wearing a $5,000 dress, unless something really bad happened. She sipped the tea. It scalded, but she needed it. Something did. He sat across from her. "Well, you're safe now. But just so you know, I've got a 6-year-old asleep in the next room. If you're dangerous, I'll throw you back into the snow." A smile tugged at her lips. The first real one in months. "I'm not dangerous, just tired of pretending." Daniel studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "We all are, eventually." The wind howled outside. Inside, silence settled like trust, tentative, fragile, and just beginning. Tomorrow would bring questions. But tonight, all that mattered was that someone had opened the door. And for the first time in her life, Isabelle LaRue felt like she hadn't walked into a house, she'd found a home. Isabelle woke to the scent of coffee and the creak of an old house coming alive. The blanket around her shoulders was thick and soft, worn from use. Sunlight filtered through the living room blinds in narrow golden lines, and somewhere in the kitchen a pan sizzled. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it hit her hard and quiet, the wedding, the message, the snow, the knock. Her fingers instinctively reached for the edge of the couch, grounding her in the unfamiliar room that had somehow become her sanctuary for the night. Footsteps. She sat up quickly, smoothing her tangled hair. Daniel appeared in the doorway holding a spatula and looking half amused, half wary. "You're awake," he said, voice low and slightly gravelly, like someone who didn't talk much in the mornings. "Didn't think you'd still be here." She opened her mouth, then paused. "I almost wasn't. But I didn't want to leave without saying thank you." He nodded once and disappeared back into the kitchen. She followed the smell of coffee like it was a lifeline. The kitchen was modest but warm. Wooden cabinets, mismatched mugs, a fridge covered in finger-painted art. A little girl with curly hair sat at the table swinging her legs and drawing with a purple crayon. She looked up and blinked at Isabel with open curiosity. "This is Lily," Daniel said. "She's 6. Lily, this is Miss Bell. She stayed over last night." Isabel crouched down. "Hi, Lily. That's a beautiful drawing. Is that a unicorn?" "It's me." "I'm riding a flying lion," Lily said proudly. Isabel laughed a sound that surprised even her. "Of course you are." Lily studied her. "You're really pretty." "Are you a fairy?" Daniel coughed from the stove. "She's just a guest, honey." Lily shrugged and went back to her drawing. Isabel stood brushing hair behind her ear, embarrassed and touched all at once. "Do you need a ride somewhere?" Daniel asked, sliding a plate of eggs and toast onto the table. "I'm off today. I can take you to a bus stop. Or the police, if that's what you need." She hesitated. "No police, and no bus stop. Not yet." He studied her in silence, and for a moment Isabel could feel the calculation behind his gaze. He wasn't stupid. He knew something wasn't right. But he wasn't pressing her. Not yet. She took a seat. "Just a couple more hours, if that's okay. I'll be out of your hair by lunch." Daniel poured her a cup of coffee and nodded. "All right, but I like to know who's in my house, Belle, especially around Lily." His voice wasn't sharp, but there was steel underneath. She looked down into her coffee. "I understand." The morning passed quietly. Isabel offered to wash dishes, and Daniel let her. There was something grounding about scrubbing plates and stacking mugs so different from the world she had run from. No catered meals, no assistants, just soap water and the occasional hum from the little girl playing in the living room. Daniel stepped out back to check on the heater unit, and Isabel took a moment to wander. The house was small but alive. Family photos on the walls, Daniel younger with a woman beside him, smiling. Then newer photos, Daniel with just Lily. There was a soft knock on the doorframe behind her. She turned to see Lily standing there holding a book. "Will you read to me?" the girl asked. Isabel blinked. "You want me to?" Lily nodded. "Dad reads the same story every time. He does the voices, but he skips pages when he's tired." Isabel knelt down and opened the book. "Well, I promise not to skip a single page." They sat on the couch together, and Lily nestled in beside her like they had known each other for months, not hours. Halfway through the story, Daniel returned, pausing in the doorway. He didn't interrupt, just watched. And something softened in his face. Not affection, not yet. But the beginnings of something gentler than suspicion. When the story ended, Lily jumped off the couch. "I'm going to draw you next," she declared. "With wings." Isabel laughed again, and Daniel stepped into the room. She doesn't usually warm up to people that fast. "She's incredible," Isabel said. "You're a good dad." Daniel looked away. "I'm just doing my best." There was a long pause, comfortable but weighted. Then he said, "You're not homeless. That dress cost more than this house." Isabel swallowed. She could lie again. She could say she was running from a bad relationship or family issues, but something in his voice, honest, tired, unvarnished, made it feel wrong. "No," she admitted quietly. "I'm not homeless." He waited. "I walked out of something last night, something I probably should have never walked into in the first place." Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Wedding." She nodded. "Yours a beat?" Then, "Yes." He gave a low whistle. "Damn." She smiled ruefully. "Yeah." Daniel studied her. "You running from someone who's going to come after you?" "No. Just from a life that doesn't feel like mine." He didn't push further, just nodded. "I can respect that." Outside, the snow began to melt. Inside, the air between them shifted just slightly, like two people standing on opposite sides of a broken bridge quietly beginning to rebuild it. Daniel turned toward the kitchen. "You want grilled cheese before you go? I make a killer one." Isabel looked down at Lily's drawing herself with wings and a golden crown. She smiled. "Only if you don't skip pages when you tell me how to make it." Daniel chuckled. "Deal." And just like that, the clock kept ticking, but no one moved toward goodbye. The days that followed didn't feel like real days to Isabel. They weren't marked by board meetings or press releases or carefully arranged dinners in high-rise restaurants with impossible views. Here, time passed by the rhythm of small, ordinary things, a morning cartoon theme song, the rustle of Lily's school backpack, and the scent of grilled cheese, always slightly burnt. She hadn't planned to stay past that first morning. But snowstorms had other plans, and Daniel, though quiet and still watching her with cautious eyes, didn't push her out. He didn't ask again about the wedding or her real name. He didn't press her for any truth she wasn't ready to offer. That kind of silence. It was a rare kindness. On the third morning, she rose early just before dawn. The house was dark and still except for the hum of the refrigerator and the slow, even breathing of the man asleep on the recliner, a book face down on his chest. His daughter had fallen asleep in his lap, a crayon still tucked between her fingers. Isabel paused there for a moment, watching them, this quiet pocket of warmth she'd never known she needed. She tiptoed into the kitchen and began making coffee. She didn't know why she was still here. Well, she did. It wasn't the snow. It was how Lily had reached for her hand during a movie the night before without asking anything in return. It was how Daniel, in his quietly worn-out way, had told her she could stay as long as it felt right. Not until you get your life together. Not until you explain yourself. Just as long as it feels right. And somehow it did. Later that afternoon, Daniel returned from a quick job repairing a busted furnace. Lily was at school. Isabel had tidied the living room, reheated leftover soup, and for reasons she couldn't explain, dug into Daniel's scattered papers on the table. "Didn't mean to pry," she said when he walked in, brushing her hands on her jeans. "But your scholarship application for Lily has a few mistakes. Formatting issues mostly. I fixed them if that's okay." Daniel blinked at her, taking the packet. "You read this, I proofread it," she said. "And you should lead with the part about working nights and still volunteering at the shelter. That's the story." He studied her carefully. "You're good at this. I used to read proposals like these every week," she said, and then caught herself. He didn't press. He just said thanks and put the papers gently back in the folder. But something about the moment shifted. His gaze held hers a second longer. There was a question in it, but also a kind of invitation, one that said, "I see you're trying. I won't ask why yet, but I see it." That night, snow fell again, though gentler than before. Isabel stepped out onto the small porch after Lily had gone to bed wrapped in one of Daniel's flannel jackets. She heard the door creak behind her and felt Daniel join her silently. "You always leave the porch light on?" she asked, not looking at him. "For Lily, mostly," he said. "She says it makes the dark less scary." Isabel nodded. "I used to sleep with a flashlight under my pillow." Daniel glanced at her. And now she hesitated. "Now I sleep in silence, but it doesn't feel like rest." A beat of quiet passed. Then he asked, what was he like? She turned to him. His expression wasn't accusatory, just curious, careful. My fiancé, she said. He nodded. Smart, polished, strategic. He knew exactly what to say to impress a room, but when no one was watching, she swallowed. He didn't look at me like I was a person, just a role to play. Daniel looked away, jaw tightening. I know that kind of man. I stayed longer than I should have, she admitted, because I thought maybe love was supposed to feel that way. Maybe I didn't deserve more. And now he asked softly. She looked up at him, the porch light catching in her eyes. Now I'm sitting on a porch with a man who fixes heaters and makes grilled cheese like it's an art form. And for the first time in years, I feel human again. Daniel turned to her, a softness blooming in the corners of his expression. You're more than human, Belle. You're honest. She laughed dryly. Only now. Now counts, he said. Sometimes now is all we've got. The next morning, Lily begged Isabel to braid her hair for school. Daniel watched from the hallway, arms crossed, silently amused. You're good with her, he said as Isabel twisted the girl's curls. She's easy to love, Isabel replied. You say that like it's not something you've done before. I haven't, she said quietly. Not like this. Lily turned and gave her a sloppy hug, her small arms warm around Isabel's waist. That was the moment Isabel knew she wasn't just hiding here anymore. She was healing. That evening, Daniel sat with Isabel on the living room floor, while Lily colored nearby. Why'd you really run? He asked quietly without preamble. She didn't answer right away. Then, because I realized I wasn't just walking into a marriage. I was handing over my name, my choices, and everything I'd built. And he didn't love me. He loved the leverage. Daniel leaned back thoughtful. Takes guts to walk away. It didn't feel brave, she admitted. It felt like drowning. He looked at her, then really looked and said, You made it out. That's what matters. She didn't say anything. She just looked back. And for the first time since the knock at 2 a.m., she thought maybe this wasn't the end of something. Maybe it was the beginning. Saturday morning broke with the sound of a dripping faucet and the faint hum of cartoons echoing down the hallway. Isabel stood barefoot in the kitchen, twisting open a stubborn jar of strawberry jam while toast popped from the toaster behind her. Her hair was damp from a shower, her sleeves rolled to her elbows. She didn't look like a woman who once held meetings with Wall Street bankers. She looked normal. And for the first time, she liked that reflection. Lily sat at the small table, coloring tongue sticking out in concentration. Can you help me spell believe? She asked without looking up. Isabel smiled, walked over, and spelled it letter by letter as the little girl wrote. You're smart, Lily declared, like Miss Megan at school, but prettier. Daniel, who had just walked in, raised an eyebrow. Careful, kid. You're inflating her ego. Isabel laughed, handing him a coffee mug. Don't worry, it's been deflated plenty. He took the mug and sipped. You sleep okay, I did. For once. Their eyes met. Something lingered there, muted affection, maybe even a question neither of them dared voice. Isabel looked away first. Daniel nodded toward the table. You're good with her. She makes it easy. She doesn't usually trust people fast. Neither do I, Isabel said. But she's got that light. You know. He nodded slowly. Yeah. I know. That afternoon, while Lily napped, Daniel asked if Isabel wanted to walk with him to the neighborhood center where he volunteered sometimes. It was a small brick building with peeling paint, but a warm heart. On weekends, it hosted food drives and coat collections. Isabel slipped on Lily's spare beanie. It was purple and too small, and followed him. Inside, volunteers were stacking donated blankets. A woman with silver hair and bright eyes greeted Daniel with a hug. Didn't think I'd see you today, Han, she said. Needed to drop off some boxes. Daniel replied, then turned. This is Belle. She's staying with us for a little while. The woman smiled. Any friend of Daniel's is a friend of mine. I'm Marjorie. Isabel shook her hand. It was warm and firm. Marjorie leaned in and whispered, "You're the first woman he's brought here in 5 years." Isabel blinked. "Oh no, it's not like that. I'm just what Marjorie asked gently. I'm not sure yet." Marjorie nodded knowingly. That's often where the best stories start. On the walk home, Daniel asked, "You okay? I like her," Isabel said. "She likes you too. That's rare. Marjorie's got a sixth sense for people who are full of it." "I used to be full of it," Isabel said with a half smile. He looked at her. "But you're not now." They passed a bus stop and Isabel slowed. Her hand grazed the cold metal bench. For a moment she looked like she might sit down, like she might go. Daniel stopped a few steps ahead. "You thinking of leaving?" She hesitated. "I'm thinking of what happens when I do." He nodded. "Want the truth?" "Always. I'll miss having someone in the kitchen who doesn't burn toast." She laughed, breath fogging in the cold. "But more than that," he said, quieter now. "Lily, she's opening up in ways I haven't seen in a long time, and that's because of you." Isabel blinked hard. "I don't want to hurt her." "Then don't. Simple. No pressure. Just honesty. The kind of truth you couldn't buy in Manhattan." That evening, Daniel pulled out an old photo album. They sat on the floor while Lily curled against Isabel's side, half asleep. "She looks like her mom," Isabel said softly, pointing to a photo of a young woman with a wide smile and tired eyes. "Yeah," Daniel replied, voice low. April passed when Lily was just a baby. Complications from an undiagnosed heart condition. "I'm sorry." "So was I." He flipped the page. "I was building my career then. Had offers lined up, promotions coming. But after April, I couldn't leave Lily with strangers. So I took local jobs, maintenance, plumbing, some HVAC gigs. Never went back to the office world." Isabel looked at him. "You gave all that up for her. I didn't see it that way," he said. "I just saw a baby who didn't have a mom, and I thought she's not going to lose both parents to ambition." Isabel swallowed. "You're not what I expected. Neither are you." They sat in silence, the kind of silence that didn't need filling. Outside, the snow fell again, silent and slow, as if the world were cushioning them just for tonight. Later, after Lily had gone to bed, Isabel lingered in the kitchen, staring at the small light on the stove. Daniel walked in, drying his hands. "I should tell you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He leaned against the doorway. "Okay, I wasn't just running from a wedding. I was running from a version of myself I didn't recognize anymore. One that smiled in photos and made decisions for shareholders and stood beside a man who didn't even ask how I liked my coffee." Daniel crossed the room slowly. "And how do you like your coffee?" She looked up, eyes glassy, with a little cream and something true to believe in. Daniel reached past her and poured 2 cups. Then, "Let's start there." She took the cup, her fingers brushing his. The heat of the mug seeped into her palms, but it wasn't the only warmth that settled in her chest. And in that kitchen, with nothing more than mismatched mugs and flickering lights, Isabel felt something solid for the first time in years. Not a promise, but maybe the beginning of one. The sun filtered through gauzy curtains, painting long golden streaks across the floorboards. Isabel stood at the window with a cup of lukewarm coffee, watching Lily run circles around a pile of snow in the front yard. Her laughter rang out like wind chimes, bright and unpredictable, filling the cold morning air with something alive. Inside, the house felt heavier. Not in a bad way, just in a way that suggested something was changing. Isabel didn't know exactly when the guilt started creeping in, perhaps somewhere between Lily handing her a crayon-scribbled drawing of the 3 of them holding hands and Daniel pouring her a second cup of coffee with the familiarity of someone who'd known her longer than a week. She felt like a trespasser in a life that wasn't hers, yet everything in it made her want to stay. Daniel walked in from the hallway, towel over one shoulder, hair damp from the shower. "I'm heading into town this afternoon," he said casually. "Just a short job replacing a water heater." She nodded. You'll be okay with Lily for a bit." "Of course," Isabel said. "She and I have big plans, blanket fort story hour, maybe a tea party if you're lucky." He chuckled. "Just don't let her paint your nails. You'll never get that glitter off." Their eyes locked for a beat longer than necessary. Then he said softly, "I trust you." It landed heavier than she expected. 3 simple words, but they carried weight. She smiled, but it was tight. "Thanks," she said, turning back toward the window to hide her unease. That afternoon, while Lily napped in a cocoon of stuffed animals, Isabel wandered into the living room. She wasn't snooping, not really, but a folder on the dining table had caught her eye, the one she'd helped him reorganize. It was still open, Daniel's rough handwriting scattered in the margins. She flipped through it slowly. Neat revisions. A cover letter she hadn't seen before addressed to the district school board. Her heart warmed at the thought of Lily thriving in a school that saw her potential. And Daniel, this man who had once designed systems for high-rise buildings, now writing essays about playground safety and after-school programs. He had quietly repurposed his brilliance into something real, something for someone else. Her fingers paused over a page that still bore her own faint notes in red ink. She should feel proud. Instead, she felt like she was slipping, becoming attached, becoming someone who belonged here. And that was dangerous, because she didn't. Because, later that night, after Lily had fallen asleep watching Finding Nemo, Isabel found herself curled on the couch next to Daniel. The movie menu hummed quietly on the screen, casting soft blue light across the room. Neither of them moved to turn it off. Daniel leaned back, one hand cradling a mug, the other resting casually along the back of the couch. "You don't talk much about where you came from," he said gently. Isabel didn't answer right away. She stared down at her knees, fingers twisting the edge of the blanket in her lap. "I used to think I had everything," she said. "A corner office, a closet full of designer clothes, invitations to every gala and fundraiser. But none of it meant anything if I had to keep pretending I was someone else to earn it." Daniel nodded, not interrupting. "I worked for years to climb out of the shadow of my father's name," she went on. "And then I met Andrew, polished, charming, connected. He made me feel like I'd finally arrived, until I realized he didn't love me. He loved the idea of what marrying me would get him." Daniel's jaw tightened. "So I ran," she finished. "Not because I was brave, because if I didn't, I would have lost myself completely." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "You ever think about going back?" he asked. "To that life," she said. "No, not even for a second. But I do think about how I'm going to face the world when it eventually finds me again." He shifted, leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You want my advice?" She looked at him surprised. He smiled faintly. "Probably not. But I'll give it anyway." "Go on," she said. "People will always try to define you by your worst moment or your biggest one. Doesn't mean they're right. You get to decide who you are now, starting from wherever you are, even if that's a couch in a messy house with a kid who draws flying lions." A soft laugh escaped her throat, small but real. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," he said. "But it is worth it." She let that sit between them. It was the kind of thing her past self would have written off as quaint. But here in this house with peeling baseboards and the smell of old books, it felt truer than anything marble floors or panoramic views had ever given her. Later, when she walked past Lily's room to check on her, she found a drawing taped to the inside of the door. It was stick figures again, 3 of them. Lily in the middle, grinning. Daniel on one side, and Isabel on the other, wearing a crown and holding a steaming cup of coffee. Above their heads in crayon letters were 3 words, "My Happy Home." Isabel stared at it for a long time. She wanted to belong to that picture more than she could admit. But in the distance in the city she'd escaped, her face was still on newspapers. Gossip blogs. Corporate whispers. She hadn't just run away from a man, she'd run away from an empire, and eventually someone would come looking. She reached up, gently touched the corner of the drawing with her fingertips, then turned off the hallway light. In her chest, hope and dread wrestled in silence. And for the first time, Isabel didn't know which one would win. The storm came in the middle of the night, not one of snow or wind, but of memory. Isabel sat upright in the guest room, drenched in cold sweat. Her breath came short fast. The nightmare still clung to her skin, flashes of camera lights, Andrew's face at the altar turning stone cold, her name. Isabel LaRue, echoing across news broadcasts, dissected, sold, spun. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady the pounding rhythm beneath her ribs. The house was quiet, but her thoughts weren't. They spun, spiraled. She couldn't sleep, not now. Instead, she wrapped herself in a blanket and crept into the living room. She didn't expect to find Daniel already there, sitting on the edge of the couch, a mug of coffee in one hand, eyes dark with thought. He didn't flinch when he saw her. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, voice low, almost a whisper. She shook her head and sat beside him. He handed her his mug without a word. She accepted it. For a few moments they just listened to the house settle. Pipes groaned, wind brushed against the windows, and somewhere in the walls the heater hummed to life. Finally, Isabel said, "Do you ever feel like the moment you start to feel safe, something's going to take it away?" Daniel didn't answer right away. "Then I used to." "What changed?" He looked at her. "I stopped waiting to lose things. Started trying to build them." She stared down at the mug. What if you build something and someone from the past shows up to knock it down? Daniel exhaled slowly, like he already knew what she wasn't saying. "Isabel," he said quietly. The first time he'd used her full name. "You know the world doesn't just forget someone like you. Not forever." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The next morning was a Sunday. Crisp and silent. Lily danced around the kitchen in mismatched socks, begging for blueberry pancakes. Isabel tried to keep her hands from shaking as she poured batter into the pan. She had made up her mind last night. She would tell Daniel the truth, everything. She owed him that. She owed Lily that. But fate has a cruel sense of timing, because the knock came before the confession. 3 sharp raps at the front door. Not panicked, not desperate, just firm. Daniel, drying a dish, glanced toward the sound, expecting anyone he asked. She froze, spatula mid-air. Her stomach dropped. He narrowed his eyes. Bell. She didn't move. Another knock. Stronger. Daniel went to the door and pulled it open halfway, his body blocking the threshold. A man in a charcoal suit stood there, tall and calm, with frost still clinging to his shoulders. "Good morning," the man said smoothly. "I'm looking for Isabel LaRue." Daniel's spine straightened. "Who's asking Jonathan Lake?" the man replied, slipping out a sleek leather wallet and flashing a private security badge. "I work for Harrington Global. Miss LaRue's safety is of paramount concern to us." Daniel said nothing. His jaw was locked. Isabel stepped into view. Jonathan gave her a small nod. "There you are. We've been looking for you. Are you all right?" Her mouth was dry. "I'm fine. Your disappearance caused considerable alarm. The media is ravenous." "I didn't disappear," she said, voice steady. "I walked away." Jonathan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Andrew's been very concerned. He's prepared to offer a private settlement. He simply wants a final statement clearing his name, and then you'll be free to move on however you like." Isabel blinked. So this was it. Not a rescue, a cleanup, a transaction. Daniel glanced between them. "This man bothering you?" "No," she said quietly. "But he's not here for me. He's here for the version of me they can package and silence." Jonathan's smile faltered. "I'm not going back," she said louder now. "I'm not signing anything. Tell Andrew he can keep his empire. I want my name back." "Very well," Jonathan said after a pause. "We'll proceed accordingly, but I assure you the press will find you soon enough." He turned, descended the steps, and disappeared down the sidewalk like he hadn't just split the air wide open. The door closed. Silence. Daniel stood still. Then he turned to her. "So," he said, voice controlled, "you're Isabel LaRue." She nodded. "You're the woman who walked away from a $100 million empire and let the world think you'd been kidnapped." "Yes. You stayed here," he continued, voice low, "in my home, with my daughter, and you never told me who you were." "I wanted to," she said, eyes stinging. I didn't know how. Every time I tried, it felt like saying it out loud would break something." "You should have let it," he snapped. "Before Lily drew pictures of you with a crown and started calling you family. That one hurt." "I'm still me," she whispered. Daniel stared at her eyes, filled with something deeper than anger betrayal. "I let you into our lives," he said. "I let Lily believe you were staying. And I—" He broke off, running a hand through his hair. Isabel stepped forward. "Please don't shut me out." He shook his head. "I need space." She flinched. Daniel softened just a fraction. "Not forever. Just until I figure out whether the woman I let in is still standing here." That night, Isabel packed her things. She folded Lily's drawings carefully into her coat pocket. She didn't cry. She couldn't. There was a strange stillness in her chest now, as if the worst had already passed and left her hollow. She didn't leave a note. She just opened the front door, stepped into the falling snow, and closed it gently behind her. The porch light stayed on. But for the first time, it didn't feel like it was meant for her. The motel room was small, tired-looking, and smelled faintly of bleach and stale coffee. Isabel sat on the edge of the stiff bed, wrapped in a blanket not meant to comfort. The television flickered soundlessly in the corner, a muted infomercial hawking miracle knives. She wasn't watching. Her phone vibrated again. 17 missed calls. 3 from Jonathan Lake, 4 from former colleagues, 1 from her mother, the rest from unknown numbers. She hadn't listened to a single voicemail. The headlines were everywhere. Now runaway CEO finally found in small-town outskirts. Isabel LaRue refuses statement. What is she hiding? Harrington demands answers after public embarrassment. They made her sound like a scandal, not a person. And somehow the only silence she couldn't bear was Daniel's. He hadn't called. Not even once. 3 days passed. 3 long, paper-thin days in which Isabel drifted between motel coffee and hollow sleep, each moment heavier than the last. She found herself scrolling through old photos, not of Andrew, not of Gala's, but of Lily's drawings. She'd taken pictures before she left. Drawings of stars and flying lions, and the one that gutted her most, the 3 of them under a bright yellow sun labeled "My Happy Home." She told herself she had done the right thing, that Daniel deserved honesty, that she had finally faced the truth about her life. So why did everything feel worse than when she was hiding? On the 4th morning, she visited the local pharmacy for cough syrup. Her throat had tightened from stress or guilt, or both. She wore sunglasses and a hoodie, but a woman near the checkout counter still paused and whispered to her friend, "Isn't that the one who Isabel left without buying anything?" That night, she sat by the window and watched the snow fall thinner now, almost gentle. Her phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a missed call. It was a message, from a number she didn't recognize, but her breath caught when she saw the name. Marjorie. "I don't know what happened, sweetheart, but Daniel's quieter than I've seen him in years, and Lily hasn't colored anything in 3 days. If you ever felt like you mattered here, it's because you do. Come home." Isabel stared at the screen. Her chest cracked just a little. Come home. The next morning, she boarded a local bus headed back toward the neighborhood she had tried to forget for their sake. Not her own. She wasn't sure if Daniel would even open the door. She just knew she had to try. She stepped off the bus mid-afternoon. The snow had mostly melted, leaving behind gray slush and puddles. The house looked the same modest quiet, with the crooked drawing still taped inside the front window. Isabel approached slowly, her breath shallow. The porch light was off. That alone almost stopped her. But then she heard laughter from around the side of the house. She followed the sound and found them in the backyard. Daniel was crouched beside Lily, fixing the chain on her small pink bicycle. His hands were greasy. Lily was covered in sidewalk chalk. For a moment, Isabel just watched them. Daniel looked tired. Lily looked like something was missing. Then Lily spotted her. She froze. Belle, her voice cracked. Daniel looked up. Time stilled. Isabel stepped forward, unsure if she was breathing. "Hi, Lily." The little girl ran to her without hesitation and threw her arms around her waist. "You left," she whispered. "You didn't say goodbye?" "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Isabel said, her voice catching. "I didn't know how." Daniel stood wiping his hands on a rag. He didn't speak. Isabel met his gaze. "Can I talk to you?" He nodded, once curt, and gestured toward the porch. Inside, he poured 2 mugs of tea, just like he always had. She took hers without a word, her hands trembling slightly. "I didn't leave to run away," she began. "I left to protect something." "You left without saying a word." Daniel replied, his voice even, but tired. "That's not protection. That's abandonment." She swallowed hard. "You're right. I was scared. Not of the media. Not even of Andrew. I was scared of how much I cared about being here." He looked at her. "You think that excuse is lying?" "No," she said. "But I wasn't lying when I read Lily bedtime stories, or when I cleaned your kitchen, or when I helped with that application. None of that was fake." Daniel sat back, arms crossed. "I didn't expect to find anything real when I knocked on your door," Isabel continued. "But I did. I found a little girl who reminded me what love felt like. I found a man who sees people not their titles. I found home." He didn't respond right away. Finally, he said, "Lily cried when you left. She asked if she'd done something wrong." Isabel flinched. "God, no. She's the only thing that made me feel right." Daniel's voice softened. "So what now? You tell the world who you are and then vanish again when it gets hard?" "No," she said, steady now. "I've made arrangements. I'm stepping down from the company permanently. Selling my shares, donating most of the proceeds to a housing initiative. Quietly. Legally. Permanently. I'm not going back to that world. I've already started dissolving it." He blinked, surprised. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right away," she said. "I'm just asking you to believe that I'm choosing you on purpose. And if you let me, I'd like to earn my way back." A long silence. Then Daniel sighed and stood. Isabel's heart sank. But instead of walking away, he held out his hand. "I'm not good at second chances," he said. "But I believe in first truths." She took his hand, and this time when their fingers touched it felt like the beginning of something that had been waiting all along. A kind of peace that didn't come from hiding, but from finally being seen. The days that followed didn't feel like repair. They felt like quiet rebuilding. Like stepping into a house after a storm and not picking up the pieces all at once, but gently, room by room, with reverence for what had broken and what was worth saving. Isabel stayed, but not as a guest anymore. She took the laundry down before Daniel could. She packed Lily's school lunches, learned how she liked her carrot sticks arranged, and that peanut butter had to be smooth, not chunky. She brewed Daniel's coffee exactly the way he liked it, with just a dash of cinnamon, though he'd never asked. In return, he cleared a drawer for her things. He didn't say much, but the gesture was louder than any apology. Lily started drawing again. The first picture was a flying house with Belle on the roof and Daniel at the wheel. Lily was in the window, arms flung wide in joy. She taped it to the fridge without a word, as if the silence itself sealed something sacred. One evening, as twilight painted the neighborhood in soft purples and amber, Isabel sat on the porch steps while Daniel worked quietly on the front yard heater. Lily was at a sleepover, her laughter no longer echoing from the house. Isabel wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, unsure whether it was to ward off the chill or the quiet. She watched Daniel from the corner of her eye. His sleeves were rolled up forearms flecked with dust, a pencil tucked behind one ear. "How did you learn to do all this?" she asked. He didn't look up. "My dad was a fix-it-all kind of guy. Taught me more with a wrench than I ever learned in college. Did you always want to be an engineer? Not really, he said. I wanted to be a writer, but I was good at math and writing didn't pay the bills. You're still a builder, she said softly. He paused, glanced at her. She continued, You build safe spaces. Not just heaters and stair rails. You built a world Lily could trust. You built a space I could fall into without breaking. Daniel sat back wiping his hands on a rag. I wasn't always good at it. No one is, she said. But you did it anyway. That counts. He looked at her long and searching. The kind of look that didn't scan appearances but sought truths beneath them. I'm not scared anymore, she added. Of what? Of being known. Of not being who people want me to be. He nodded slowly. That's a hard fear to beat. I didn't beat it, she said. You helped me carry it until I could set it down. Daniel stood, tossed the rag over his shoulder, and walked toward her. I never asked what happened after, he said. After you left. What did you do? I went back to the firm. Quietly. I sat across from a boardroom full of men in cufflinks and said, You can have the company, the tower, the legacy. I don't want it. I signed it all away except a small fund I kept for something better. He raised a brow. Better, I want to build something like this, she said. Real places. Affordable housing. Safe spaces for single parents, foster kids, anyone who just needs a door to knock on at 2 a.m. and be let in without question. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You'll do it. I believe that. Will you help me? She asked, voice quiet. He didn't answer with words. Instead, he stepped forward, reached out, and pulled her gently to her feet. And then he did something he hadn't done since she returned. He hugged her. Not as a friend, not as a stranger learning to trust again, but as a man who had waited for the truth and found it was exactly what his heart had hoped. Her arms folded around him and they stood there wrapped in each other beneath the porch light she had once stood beneath shivering alone. This time she was warm. Inside the house was dim but alive. The heater hummed. The clock ticked softly and the scent of cinnamon from an earlier baked pie still lingered in the air. Daniel poured them each a cup of tea, and they sat at the kitchen table as the world settled around them. I never told you, she said, stirring hers about the first night I saw you. You mean when you knocked on my door? No, she said. Earlier. Before the knock. I saw the porch light flicker on through the trees. I was cold, hurting, didn't know where I was. And then I saw it. A warm light, steady, not too bright, not too loud. Just enough to say, Come closer if you need something. He leaned back. That old porch light. It felt like hope. He chuckled, shaking his head. It flickers half the time. I've meant to replace it for years, don't, she said. Not yet. It brought me home. Before bed, Isabel peeked into Lily's room out of habit. Though the girl wasn't home, the scent of her lavender shampoo lingered. On her nightstand was a picture she hadn't seen before a Polaroid Isabel hadn't known was taken. It was of the three of them. She was laughing, head tilted back, Daniel looking at her with an expression so gentle it hurt. Lily was in the middle, eyes lit up. Scrawled beneath it in Lily's handwriting, This is where magic lives. Isabel touched the photo with her fingertips, then closed the door gently. Downstairs, Daniel was turning off lights. She joined him, brushing her hand against his. He didn't flinch. They walked together through the quiet, turning off one lamp at a time until only the porch light remained. Neither of them turned it off, and outside in the quiet of a town that never made headlines, hope kept flickering softly just enough to be seen. It started with a knock. But not like before. This one came in the late afternoon with sunlight slanting through the windows and the smell of baked apples curling from the oven. Isabel was tying Lily's shoes on the living room floor while Daniel adjusted the thermostat near the hallway. Everything felt ordinary, quiet, whole. The knock broke it not violently but firmly, a reminder that the world didn't disappear just because they'd built a safe corner within it. Daniel answered the door with a practiced calm. Isabel rose slowly, heart already fluttering. It wasn't Jonathan this time. It wasn't Andrew or a reporter. It was a woman in a tailored gray blazer and patent leather heels, flanked by a younger man carrying a digital tablet. "Ms. LaRue," the woman said. "My name is Caroline Niven. I represent a consortium of investors who were very surprised when you stepped away from LaRue Holdings." Isabel blinked. "How did you find me?" Caroline offered a placid smile. "We have resources, and a very expensive reason to care where you've gone." Daniel stepped forward slightly. "She's not interested. Whatever it is she's done." Caroline barely looked at him. "I'm here to offer Ms. LaRue a new opportunity, one that makes sense for her talents, her vision, and her name." The younger man opened his tablet, spinning it toward Isabel. A presentation flickered to life. Renderings of modern housing complexes, digital dashboards showing funding projections, headlines reading LaRue Urban Renewal Project. "Affordable housing," Caroline said as if she were unveiling a yacht, "powered by sustainable materials, data-driven community development. We want to brand it with you. You could lead from wherever you like." Isabel stared at the tablet, then at Caroline. "You want me to come back," she said, but quieter. "Palatable. Sellable. We want to help you make an impact at scale," Caroline said smoothly. "You already have a cause. Now you have an audience. Let us amplify it." Daniel didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Isabel handed the tablet back. "Thank you," she said. "But no." Caroline's mask cracked. "You haven't even heard the financials. That's the part I'm least interested in." The younger man looked stunned. Caroline blinked slowly, recalibrating. "You're walking away from millions." "I've already walked away from billions," Isabel replied, voice steady. "I'm not here to be a symbol or a pitch deck. I'm here to do something that matters." She glanced at Daniel. "And I don't need a boardroom to prove that." Caroline pursed her lips, nodded curtly, and turned to leave. As the door clicked shut, Daniel exhaled. "You meant that he asked." She turned to him. Every word. He crossed his arms, thoughtful. "So, what now?" Isabel smiled. "We build something real. From the ground up. The right way. No headlines. No PR firm. Just us." 2 weeks later, they held the first planning meeting at the community center. Marjorie made coffee and insisted on name tags even though everyone already knew one another. Daniel stood by a whiteboard with blueprints. Isabel sat cross-legged on a folding chair beside a veteran school principal, a retired city planner, and 2 single moms juggling toddlers. There were no suits, no assistants, just people who had lived through hard things and wanted to help others survive them. "This," Isabel whispered to Daniel between comments, "is what the world needs more of. People. People who remember what it's like to need a second chance and want to be the reason someone else gets one." Daniel smiled almost shyly. "You've changed." She tilted her head. "Maybe. Or maybe I just remembered who I was before I got lost." The first project was modest, restoring a long-abandoned house into transitional housing for women leaving domestic violence shelters. Isabel used a portion of the trust she'd kept not to control, but to launch. The rest came from grants, volunteers, and Daniel's long list of former clients who owed him favors and remembered his quiet reliability. He worked on the roof himself. Isabel painted walls alongside a mother of 3. Lily handed out lemonade from the front steps wearing a plastic hard hat. They called it the North Light Project after the porch light that had first welcomed Isabel in from the snow. One evening, after days of drywall and dust, Daniel found Isabel alone in the nearly finished house. She stood in what would be the kitchen, her hands on the edge of the counter, staring at the space as if she could already hear laughter filling it. He stepped behind her arms, folded, thinking of moving in. She smiled, just imagining what it'll feel like when someone walks through that door scared out of their mind, and realizes they're safe now. He leaned on the opposite counter. "You gave up a lot to do this." "I didn't give anything up," she said. "I traded up." He chuckled. You know, when I first opened my door that night, I thought you were going to collapse." "I almost did," she said. "But you didn't let me." Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out something folded. It was one of Lily's drawings, creased and a little faded. "Found this behind the bookshelf when we moved it," he said. "Thought maybe you'd want it." She opened it carefully. It was the original, the three of them beneath the yellow sun, labeled "My Happy Home." She stared at it for a long moment. Then gently she tucked it into her jacket pocket. "You know," she said, voice softer now, "for all the millions I was offered, this is still the most valuable thing I've ever been handed." Daniel stepped forward, brushing his hand along hers. "That's because it can't be bought." Their fingers laced slowly, effortlessly. And as the sun dipped outside the newly painted window, the house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like the first place in a long time where something sacred had taken root. Not an empire, not a brand, but a life. One built not on power or legacy, but on love, and the unshakable worth of being truly seen. The house glowed softly beneath the early evening sky. Fresh coats of white paint shone clean and welcoming, and flower beds newly planted hugged the foundation like gentle hands. In the backyard, Lily ran in clumsy zigzags, chasing after a kite Daniel had helped her build its tail, fluttering like ribbons of freedom. Isabel stood on the porch, brushing dust from her jeans, a clipboard in one hand. Her hair was tied back, cheeks flushed with the effort of real work and real purpose. But her eyes, their light came from somewhere deeper, somewhere settled. Tomorrow was opening day. The first family would arrive, a young mother with a toddler, and nowhere else to go. Isabel had memorized their names. She'd placed a book on the nightstand, folded fresh sheets, lit a small candle in the entryway that smelled like citrus and hope. Marjorie had insisted on hanging a sign over the door. The North Light Project. A home, not a handout. Isabel had cried when she saw it. That night, as they packed away the final tools, Daniel found her standing barefoot in the middle of the main room. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "I was just thinking about the first night I stepped into your house. How I felt so small, so lost." He didn't speak, just listened. And now she continued. "I feel like I've built something that helps others not feel that way. Maybe that's how we know we've healed, when our scars become someone else's shelter." Daniel stepped beside her. "You didn't just build a shelter, Belle. You built a way out. That matters. I couldn't have done it without you." He turned to her, his voice lower. "You didn't need me to do it. But I'm glad you let me walk beside you while you did." She looked at him. Really looked. The man who had opened his door to a stranger in a torn designer dress, whose daughter had colored her way into Isabel's heart, whose quiet steadiness had become the only thing that made her believe again. Her voice came softer now. "I wasn't planning to fall in love with you." Daniel held her gaze. "I wasn't planning to be someone you could fall in love with." A beat passed. Then Isabel reached for his hand and said, "Let's stop planning." The next morning was crisp, full of promise. Volunteers bustled about, setting up refreshments in the yard. The town's mayor showed up with a ribbon and oversized scissors. The local news came, small cameras and big hearts. Daniel gave a quiet interview. Isabel declined the spotlight, letting the project speak for itself. But the true moment, the one no camera caught, happened hours later, when all the guests had gone and the sun had begun to lower itself gently across the rooftops. A small blue sedan pulled up to the curb. A woman stepped out clutching a diaper bag. She looked young, tired, and unsure. Her child, no more than 2, clung to her leg. Isabel walked out alone, leaving the others inside. "Hi," she said softly. "You must be Jordan." The woman nodded, eyes darting with uncertainty. Isabel smiled gently. "This is your space now. Come see it." She guided her through the front door, pointing to the basket of toiletries, the stocked mini fridge, the crib tucked neatly in the corner. Jordan didn't say much, but when she sank into the edge of the bed and her child curled beside her, The relief that washed over her face said everything. Isabel stepped out to give her privacy. Daniel was standing in the hallway watching. She didn't say, "Thank you," Isabel murmured. Not disappointed, just noticing. "She doesn't have to," he replied. She came. That was her way of saying yes. Later that night, back at Daniel's house, the three of them sat on the floor building a puzzle. Lily pointed to one corner piece. "Is this the edge?" she asked. "Yeah," Isabel said, smiling. "It's where things start to make sense." Lily yawned mid-puzzle and curled up against Isabel's side. Daniel glanced at the clock. "She's out cold. I'll carry her up." He watched Isabel gently lift Lily into her arms, her movement instinctive, graceful. As she climbed the stairs, Daniel remained on the floor, staring at the incomplete puzzle. One piece rested near his knee. When Isabel returned, he picked it up and handed it to her. "Last piece," he said. She placed it in the center. They both stared at it for a moment. Then she said quietly, "I never wanted to be rescued." "I know. But I wanted someone who wouldn't walk away." "I didn't." She turned to him. "And I won't," she added. Daniel leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. The moment pulsed between them, quiet and full. No rush, no fireworks, just something solid, something chosen. A week later, Isabel received a letter. It was hand-delivered. The seal was familiar. She opened it slowly, expecting some last-ditch plea from the company or worse, legal maneuvering. But it wasn't from Andrew. It was from a woman named Teresa, a former janitor at LaRue Holdings. Someone Isabel had only vaguely remembered. Ms. LaRue. "I don't know if you remember me. You probably don't. I was the one cleaning the conference floor every night after the board left. I saw you stay late. I saw you cry once in the hallway. I wanted to tell you then, but I didn't know how. You don't have to save the world all at once. You just have to light one room at a time. You lit mine even when you didn't know it. Thank you." Isabel folded the letter and pressed it to her chest. She didn't cry. She just breathed in deeply, quietly. And in that breath was everything she had once feared she'd lost: her name, her purpose, her place. That evening, someone knocked at the door again. This time it was Lily. She had a new drawing. 3 people again, holding hands, but this time under a house with lights in every window. Above it, in bright purple marker, "Sometimes you knock on a door and someone knocks back." Isabel looked at Daniel, and he whispered, smiling, "Welcome home." The town was quiet that night, hushed by early spring rain and the kind of dusk that made everything porch steps, garden beds. Familiar faces look softer, almost holy. The air smelled like fresh soil and lavender soap. Inside Daniel's house, laughter drifted from the kitchen, low and rich like a song remembered. Isabel wiped her hands on a towel, having just pulled the last tray of muffins from the oven. She wasn't dressed like a woman who used to dominate boardrooms. She wore jeans fraying at the edges and a sweater Daniel insisted was his, though it now lived permanently draped over her shoulders. Her hair was half pulled up her cheeks, flushed with heat and happiness. Daniel stood beside her, filling mugs with tea. And Lily, who had been supervising the baking process, lay on the floor surrounded by markers and sticky notes, carefully labeling each muffin as approved by Lily the expert. They had fallen into this rhythm quietly. No big declarations. No carefully constructed timelines. Just one choice after another, simple, clear, true. Home didn't come all at once, but it had come. After dinner, they walked together to the North Light house. The rain had eased to a mist, and the path glistened under street lamps like a thread guiding them forward. The house stood proudly now, not just because it was structurally sound, but because it breathed. Kids' bicycles leaned against the porch. Curtains fluttered in lit windows. Someone inside was playing an old guitar. A baby's cry rang out from an open window, followed by soft coos and the quiet lull of someone singing. Isabel and Daniel stopped at the edge of the sidewalk, Lily swinging between their clasped hands. "This is the 5th family now," Isabel said, "and we have 3 more applications on the way." Daniel nodded. They're calling you the porch light builder." She smiled. "I kind of like that. It fits." They stood in the glow for a moment longer. Then Lily tugged their hands. "Can we go inside?" Isabel kneeled beside her. "Not tonight, sweetheart. Tonight is their night." Lily pouted. "But I helped paint the bookshelf." Daniel leaned down. "And we'll come by tomorrow so you can see your masterpiece. Right now, they're building their first memory here. They need to make it their own." Lily nodded solemnly. "Okay. Memories need space to breathe." Isabel looked at Daniel, eyebrows raised. "Where does she get this wisdom?" He grinned. "Cartoons. And maybe Marjorie." Back at home, Lily went to bed early, worn out from a day of CEO-level planning, as she called it. Daniel turned off the lights one by one, and Isabel settled onto the couch, cradling a mug of cocoa. A soft knock came at the door. When Daniel opened it, Marjorie stood there holding a small framed photograph. "I found this in an old folder from the shelter days," she said, handing it over. "Thought you two should have it." Isabel took the frame. Inside was a photo, grainy and imperfect, taken from a community center wall years ago. A much younger Daniel standing beside a heater he'd just installed. A paper sign taped to the wall behind him read, "Heat for the ones still healing." Below it, someone had scribbled, "Don't forget the power of warmth, literal and otherwise." Daniel's throat worked as he stared at it. Isabel brushed her fingers along the glass. "Thank you," she said softly. Marjorie smiled, eyes shining. "You two are the real thing. Not the fancy kind, not the flashy kind. The kind people actually remember." Later that night, with rain pattering gently on the roof, Daniel found Isabel curled on the porch swing, wrapped in his sweater, staring at the old light overhead. It still flickered slightly stubborn as ever. "You never did replace it," she said as he sat beside her. He shrugged. "It works, even when it wobbles." She rested her head against his shoulder. "I used to think love had to be grand to be real," she murmured. Lavish proposals, dramatic moments, fireworks. And now she turned her face up to his. "Now I think it's this. A kid asleep upstairs. A light that flickers but doesn't go out. A man who makes room beside him even after all the doors I've closed." Daniel brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "It's real. All of it." She pulled a small slip of paper from her pocket and handed it to him. He unfolded it. It was Lily's latest drawing, slightly better proportioned stick figures this time, under a banner that read, "This is what forever looks like." Daniel didn't speak. He didn't need to. He just reached for her hand and held it as the porch light hummed above them. In the quiet that followed, Isabel closed her eyes and breathed it in. Not the past, not the pressure, not the name she had once thought defined her. But this moment, the warm, steady heartbeat of a life chosen deliberately. She had knocked on a stranger's door once at 2 a.m., cold, scared, and unsure she belonged anywhere. Now she didn't just belong. She lit the light. She kept it on. For herself. For Lily. For anyone who still believed in second chances. And in the house behind her, a small girl stirred in her sleep and whispered through a dream. Sometimes you don't need a map, just a porch light that stays on. And Isabel smiled, because she knew this one always would.